the first version of Dreams we want to be for the fans of Procreate. Because you're not wrong, man. Like, it is a totally different world. And we found this, like, it's been five plus years of development. You know, with Procreate, when you mark the screen, you get it. It's like, oh, I totally get what this product does. And then you kind of intuitively figure everything out from that. Animation is very, very different. And we hoped to bring that super accessible experience to Dreams.
I imagine pretty much every artist on Earth has tried Procreate, the incredible iPad drawing app that launched back in 2011. Its innovative features and incredible performance have led it to be the #1 paid iPad app for 6 years running. And now, the team behind it have released a dedicated animation app called Procreate Dreams. On the podcast today, I am honored to have James Cuda, CEO and co-founder, and Claire Destis, the Chief Product Officer of Procreate. In this conversation, we dive into the history of the groundbreaking Procreate app, the realities of building a software company in Tasmania, and of course, we talk all about the brand new app from the team, Dreams. I have not been this excited about a new animation tool in a long time, and I'm not the only one. Animators like Aaron Blaze are raving about it, and some think that this $20 app, yes, you heard that right, it's $20, might just usher in a new golden age of 2D animation. So I'm sure you want to learn more. Let's meet James and Claire. James, Claire, it's truly an honor to have you guys on the School of Motion podcast. You know, our entire audience loves Procreate, and when Dreams was announced, the buzz was palpable in the animation community. I'm sure you two felt it. So I just want to first of all just say thank you for making time, and literally you are in the future because you guys are in Tasmania, I'm in Florida. We're on opposite ends of the air. So I appreciate you making the time to do this and having such a beautiful art-directed shot for this as well.
Thanks for having us, Joe. It's a pleasure to be here. We're only, I think, a week and a bit away now, Claire, I think.
Yeah.
It's coming down, so a week and a bit away from releasing, but it's nice to stop and tools down and say g'day. So
love it. Well, so this episode is actually going to launch on the 22nd. So this will be this will go live on the launch day. So this should be really really timely.
So we should get to say like order it now or purchase now a few times.
Exactly. Yeah. Listen, I need an affiliate link, by the way. I haven't talked to you guys about it. All right. So, James, I want to start with you. So, you know, you're the founder and CEO. And I know that in a previous life, you were actually a designer doing client work. And now you're running this software company that's been really, really successful. So I'd love to hear just a little bit of your story, like how you made that transition from the world of client work, you know, actually on the box doing stuff. And now you're designing the tools that artists are using.
It was a kind of a hectic time when I was a designer. I had a little shop here in town, Joey, a little brand agency in town. And at some point, I think it was when Steve showed the first iPad. When we saw that first iPad, there was something that triggered me. You know, I think there was a deep want to move out of the client model. There's nothing wrong with the client model, but for me personally, there was no room to kind of move, nothing to kind of, there was no runway to kind of really try and take flight. So I had already been looking at crazy ways to get out of that model, but I really didn't know how to do it. When the iPad was shown on stage, I think that was the big trigger for me to think about, well, where does that go? And so I'm the co-founder. The other co-founder is my wife, Alana. And I think she was more excited than I was, to be honest. When the announcement happened, she came running into the bedroom, woke me up like, you got to see this new thing. You got to see this new thing. And we took a look at this new device. The device was really the catalyst to prompt the courage to get out of the business we were in to start something new. When we started the software business, I still never really left design. Procreate 1 was designed by myself, and Dreams has been another design kind of passion project, even though Claire's been a big help in a lot of the experience side, and we've got another designer here to help. But the transition from that little brand shop to where we are now, it's been a long journey, but I can't let go of the design tools, man. I can't let go, because for me, it's kind of the product and the experience of the product itself. The design of the product is kind of hand in hand.
I want to ask you about, you know, you're talking about the iPad launch and something clicked and you saw some opportunity there. I'm curious why didn't you see that opportunity on laptops or computers, which, you know, were already a thing? And what was it about the iPad that made you see something different?
The biggest thing that really hit me like a ton of bricks, Joey, was the multi-touch angle. The whole screen was something that just felt joyous to kind of explore. There had been sort of devices like that in the past. I don't know if you remember, there was this thing called the Ultra Mobile PC, the UMPC or something. I think that was the only kind of analog back then. And that had fans, and the battery would last for, 2 minutes or something. The iPad was completely different. It had this battery that would just last for a whole day, and the entire screen was the interface. And I think the opportunity that we saw back then was pretty huge. And of course, the first thing that we wanted to do was draw on it. That was the first kind of obvious choice, even though there was no stylus for it. Finger painting was a little weird, but we felt like that was the curve, that, kids aren't going to want to use the ultra mobile PCs or the laptops, actually directly, manipulating stuff on the screen. That just set all the lights off upstairs. And I think even today, that's a big driver for how we design, how we develop our experiences, that multi-touch, because it's a far more humane way to interact with technology, far more humane. And I think even though that promise of the iPad 1 being that really multi-touch tactile experience, that's never really changed. The hardware's got better. Now we've got Apple Pencil, which is way better. But that initial multi-touch experience is something that fascinates us. And I don't think we've really leveraged that to the point where, we're really getting that perfect multi-touch experience. I think we're always trying to chase that perfect multi-touch experience.
That's so interesting. And, I use Procreate quite a bit. My kids love it, so I've seen hundreds of artists use it. And we're going to get into this a little bit later, but I mean, there's some really innovative UX kind of conventions that you guys have put into it based around that. So that's interesting that was kind of the thing that jumped out when you saw the iPad. Like, oh yeah, you can actually interface with this thing in a different way. So Claire, I want to ask you, so you have a different background. Actually, I Google stalked you a little bit. I hope you don't mind. So you're the Chief Product Officer at Procreate. Your Twitter bio says you're a recovering academic, which I don't know what that means. So I wanted to ask you about that and kind of hear your story. How did you end up as Chief Product Officer at this really cool cutting edge software company?
Yeah, well, so my background was in research. Did the whole many years of university and then went through the process of postdoctoral fellowships and to become a research scientist. But the reason I was there was I always wanted to do new cutting edge things, and I just wanted to make things no one had ever made before. And I found that the machine of academia was very much singular focused on you churning out papers. Like that was what success looked like. And I was actually actively discouraged from trying to make things, solve problems, continuously work on like one thing to actually get somewhere. And when I saw these guys just quietly in a house on the other side of town, just like making whatever they wanted and just changing the industry just from a couple of rooms out in the suburbs, I was just like, that's freedom. That's what that's what I want to do. I want to be able to just the only person that, in my early years, and probably still only had to convince you that it was a good idea, and that's the freedom of that compared with having to prove it through the literature, get it through like a funding board, or it's just like taking all the chains off.
Interesting. So, one of the things I taught at an art school for a year, and, especially the system that we have here in the United States for higher education is pretty broken, in my opinion. And especially in the world of design and creative work, I'm always struck by the fact that like you can just kind of prove that you're good at something and have a career in it. And in academia, and I wasn't really in academia, I was at an art school, but I sort of saw a little bit of that credentialism, I guess, is maybe the word I'm looking for. So I'm wondering if does that feel true to you, that sort of the world Procreate operates in is as close to a meritocracy as there is. If your work is good, people will pay you to produce it, but maybe not in the world you came from.
Yeah. And that's huge. It's great to just be around people who come from all kinds of different backgrounds, but they're here because they're inventors, because they're just super creative.
So I actually didn't realize this until we were prepping for the interview. I knew Procreate was widely used. I didn't realize it's the #1 best-selling iPad app for the last 6 years, which is wild. And that is an extremely competitive space. So this, I mean, I don't know if this is a softball question or a really tough one, but do either of you know like what the secret is? Like, why has it been so successful, do you think?
I think there's a couple of things, and we could probably tic-tac on this one, but price point is a big one. Price point is a really, really big one. And I think that's a really interesting point of view because we kind of defy the market in this respect.
Yes, you do.
But there's also a laser focus on the customer and on the product. We're not funded by, venture capitalists. We're not trying to, IPO the company. We're just really about the product and about what that customer is going to experience. And I think there's lots of other angles that have propelled Procreate to hold that spot for so long. But I think one of the core reasons is that our approach to designing, developing, and supporting the product is just always focused on how the customer feels, what they get out of it. And I think it's resonating with people. I think people really appreciate that point of view that we've taken with the product and with the experience and with that price point. I think the price point is something that is a very hotly debated topic in our industry. The model that we've chosen is kind of goes against the grain of what normally would be approached from any kind of software enterprise. But I think people really appreciate it.
Let's dive into that a little bit. The pricing, it's funny. I mean, it never occurred to me that was like a big part of the success of Procreate. But now that you've said it, actually makes a lot of sense. And to me, it's so counterintuitive. Now, you just said that you didn't have any VC. Did you have any investors, or is this a bootstrapped company?
Totally bootstrapped, man. We for a reason too, Joey, because we didn't, we really wanted to make an impact in the market and specifically in the creative industry. And we felt that if we take on a perspective that's kind of counter to where we want to go, then we're going to be beholden to different kind of, market realities. But from our point of view, there's something really powerful about having the people who make the software completely in control of the destiny of the software. And I think for us, that's so important. As we've grown, we've tried to protect that. We don't really want to be beholden to, a master, so to speak. We just kind of want to do what we want to do without those kind of impediments.
Well, that's astounding to me. The people listening to this and watching this, I don't know if you understand how rare that is to have a bootstrapped software company. And it's not a SaaS. You're not offering a subscription. You're charging a fee one time for this piece of software. So, in hindsight, maybe you can look back and say like, oh, that was such a genius idea that we did that. But at the time, I mean, I'm trying to remember, when Procreate launched, there wasn't like, everything's a subscription now, like literally everything. If you drive a Tesla, there are certain features that you have to pay a monthly subscription.
I know, it's getting crazy, Joey. Everything's a subscription these days. I don't know what's going on.
So what was the decision making like back then when you were launching this thing? I mean, was it just that wasn't really what people were doing, and so you didn't, and then you're like, well, let's just keep it because it worked. Like, how did you arrive at this decision?
I mean, what you've just said there, Joey, is kind of correct in the sense that you've got to, going back, 13 years, is it 13? I think it's about 13.
Must be getting close.
I'm losing track of how long
we're going.
But in the early days, everything, you got to remember, like everything was like 99 cents. Every app was like 99 cents. The value of software was quite, reductive back then. When we launched, we were like $5, which was expensive, So that's how we started. It was just a market reality. We had to kind of conform to that pricing model. What was interesting, though, was that there was another angle to this. As people started to accept higher and higher price points and then subscriptions came in, the thing that really repulsed us to the idea of a subscription is that, artists, we want to own the tools that we used to make. And like, I'll use an example. I like messing around with old film photography I have since I was a lad. Love digital, I just can't get out of film for some reason. But I like to own the camera. It's an extension of me. When I buy a new lens, I find that's my tool that I use to create. And I think that's not limited just to one subsect of creativity or one market. I think all creatives, whether you're writing, directing, painting, whatever that endeavor is, I think we need to own the tool. That's a very personal kind of experience. So renting our tools just doesn't feel like it's the right way to go for our particular audience. And we oftentimes, Joey, kind of put ourselves in the place of the customer. Like, what would we want? Do we want to rent our tools? No, we don't. We don't want to rent. We don't want to rent our tools. I don't want to rent my cameras. They're mine. I want to use them. So we kind of held fast when that shift started happening, believing that, again, we're not after our stock price going up. We're not after trying to fulfill certain sales realities. We just want to do what's right by the customer. And so from our point of view, doing right by the customer meant not going down the subscription road. And there's definitely, we're leaving money on the table. There's a truth to that, but that's not why we're here. If we're profitable, Joey, we can make more software.
Right.
That makes us happy. That's what we're here to do.
Yeah, and I think you're right. That all these things are linked together. That because of not this driving force coming from externally, we're able to make decisions that are great for the customer, and hopefully people acknowledge that and enjoy that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be so much pressure, for companies like Adobe where there's shareholders, right? And the stock price in the end. I mean, that's the KPI that everyone's kind of pushing. And you guys don't have that. It's brilliant. I mean, there's so much about the story. I mean, you guys are based in Tasmania, which is not Silicon Valley, right? I mean, the number one iPad app in the world for the last 6 years is developed in Tasmania, which, I'll be honest, I had to go look up exactly where it was. I knew it was in Australia, but I didn't know exactly where. Yeah, and I mean, is there any? I'd love to hear a little bit about just sort of the, where you guys live. Is there any kind of startup ecosystem there? Are there lots of entrepreneurs? Are you kind of a weirdo, James? This entrepreneur?
Yeah. Question.
Yeah. What's it like building a company there?
Well, Tasmania, it's kind of an interesting place. It's got quite a lot of a heavy kind of creative scene here as well, which is probably more what we're connected to rather than more of a tech startup. There are a few little places that are doing well, but yeah, it is an interesting challenge. But it does also mean that it probably also feeds into that being able to make your own rules kind of thing. We're not necessarily having people coming in and out directly from those other software companies with their ideas of how things should be done. Means we can be a bit more independent, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of formed part of our identity, Joey, that we're kind of here at the edge of the world, kind of doing our thing in a bubble. And that bubble allows us to really go inward and think about what, how we can best serve our customers without, as Claire was saying, without that kind of the influence of just let's just raise a lot of dollars, let's get into AI, let's do the latest trend, let's just do this thing. Here we're disconnected from that very deliberately. We thought about moving over to the Valley. Once Procreate started to kind of take off, we were like, well, we should, try and expand and go where the fish are. There's lots of people that we could probably try and attract over in the Valley. But I think that we came to the conclusion that that'll probably kind of nerf our culture, because we've developed this really unique culture down here. And so if we're going to go over there, it probably isn't going to work. So we've made the decision to try and stay and grow here. And to be honest, man, it's a challenge. It is a challenge, because, we get on the phone and we're growing and it's great. We're attracting some wonderful people from the Valley. But it still is a challenge because when we get on the phone and say, we're Procreate, we're doing this thing, we get a lot of interest. But as soon as we say, and you got to move to Tasmania, there's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a long plane ride.
I think it's you having to look at the map and try and figure out where that is.
Yeah, exactly. Wait, Tasmania? I mean, I'm assuming most Americans, their experience with Tasmania is the Tasmanian devil cartoon character.
Totally.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
I'm kind of happy with that, though. It's kind of a good brand ambassador, the little Tasmanian devil. The little
everyone likes him. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can tell you, I bet if you had moved to Silicon Valley and you'd gone and raised a Series A and a Series B, I don't know that your investors would say it's a good idea to create a brand new 2D cell animation app during the AI boom. So before we get into Dreams, I want to hear a little bit more about Procreate. So, when you were building it, I watched some of the talks you gave from a few years ago, James, and you've told some interesting stories about some of the challenges that you faced trying to launch that. I'm curious if any stick out for you. And maybe any make or break moments when you launched.
There was a lot, Joe, because we were all the bootstrapped angle we came from did give us a lot of problems. And like, for instance, in the early years, we couldn't hire anyone because we had very little money, to be honest. We were just barely surviving. But I think that was a benefit in hindsight, because we kind of dug deep and we found, well, how are we going to kind of attract people? How are we going to attract customers? And we thought the best way we can do that is through invention, by using what we can and using the iPad, using, kind of the multi-touch angle. We kind of reinvested in ourselves and in the product, and continually tried to reinvest in that product. But that was a real challenge to get off the ground. We looking at Procreate Pocket, which is the little mini version.
Right. The
reason why we did that was because we needed to raise some more money, but we didn't want to go to down the road of a Series A or whatever. I actually had a few calls back then because I was tempted, because I didn't want the show to stop. We were about 12 months in. We were just surviving, and there was a lot of kind of noise on the App Store back then. But we made the decision, well, we want to stay the course, even though this is harder. So how do we do this? How do we keep ourselves going? How do we keep the party going and remain independent? And we thought, well, we can leverage some of this IP by putting it on the phone and seeing if we can create a similar experience on the phone. And even though that wasn't remember version 1, it was pretty bare bones, but it did give us a little bit of a hit of revenue that helped us just kind of survive again. But they were really, really hard days going back those days. It was only really when the iPad Pro was launched that we saw ourselves kind of really start to take off. Prior to that, it was really, really difficult to hang on during those early years.
It was really interesting for me because I started 2 months or so before the iPad Pro came out. And so I saw the before and after very, very clearly.
I got to imagine that you're selling a lot of iPads for Apple with your app. And Apple, I've seen them, like actively promote Procreate, like, pretty publicly before. How has the relationship been with Apple? Because I mean, Procreate's this incredible app, but also you have some platform risk, I would imagine, because it's on Apple. The App Store is the distribution channel. So how is that? Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. Has that been nerve-wracking? Has that been like an amazing relationship? Is it a two-way kind of thing?
It's an amazing relationship, Joey, because Apple kind of operate like a startup themselves. There's a lot of and they are also maniacally focused on the product. Yeah, totally. But they have there's an affinity there, I think, in the sense that they are completely laser focused on their product as well. So I think the relationship's been great over the years because there's a lot of affinity that's been developed over the years. And half of the reason why we've stayed on the platform is because the hardware is just so good. It is just really, really good. We've thought about moving to Android and other platforms, and whilst we can't discount what happens in the future, certainly from day one to where we are now, the hardware is just insane. I mean, I never thought when we started the company that the little iPad would have this desktop level processor in it now. And it's just what a lovely journey we've been on from this mobile kind of experience now to something really, really interesting when it comes to a hardware point of view. And that relationship that we've had with Apple it's been wonderful.
And now even like we have Pencil on even on the consumer end devices, like that's been huge to be able to give that same experience to everyone.
Yeah. So
I want to ask a little bit about and I'm not sure if this is like a technology thing. I think this is probably more of like a design philosophy thing that you guys seem to have. I'm curious where it comes from. And so the example I want to use is if I was designing an illustration app and I'm thinking to myself, okay, users very often want to draw a circle. And it's hard to do that, so let me just make a circle tool, and you'll click and you'll drag, and you can reposition the circle. Yeah. That's not how you guys do it. You draw a circle as imperfectly as a human draws it, and then you just hold the pencil there for an extra second, and it just, you want a circle? Here it is. And then you can just move your hand, then you let go, and there's your circle, and it's perfect. But it still retains the quality. I would never think of that, and there's just not a lot of software that kind of works that way, that doesn't do the obvious thing. So I'm curious, where does that come from? How do you guys think about developing features like that?
Yeah, I think it starts with the platform itself. The multi-touch angle gives us a lot of this whole kind of new pond to kind of play in. But it also goes back to our philosophy of how we make stuff. Because what we're here to do is really try and invent. That's our core. And if you look at where we were just talking about before, where we kind of had a necessity to invent to keep ourselves going, that core is very much alive in everything we're doing. So when using the example of the quick shape tool you just mentioned there, Joey, it was born from, we had a discussion with Mattel, and they were like, we can't draw Hot Wheels, man. Like, can you help us with this? And so, yeah, the first kind of approach was, well, do we just get the traditional, grab a tool from the menu bar and do the thing? But we're not here to copy. What we really want to do is find improvements. And the way that we approach that is by, again, going, what's the most obvious, simple, straightforward way that we can make a circle? And the obvious way is just draw a circle and let the computer figure it out. And it sounds easy. I don't know how long, because Claire was one of the engineers on that. How long? It was like 3 years of work on that.
Before it was right, because people, there is that kind of just make a shape tool like we're used to, but the quick shape, like you say, it retains all the expressiveness of your brush stroke and stuff like that. It's like, so I think we always try and look at, okay, you want a shape, but why would we lose everything that's already great about painting in our app? We have to find a solution that is multi-touch and uses the pencil as best it can. And
Totally. And yeah, I never thought it'd be so hard to just make the iPad figure out a circle, but it turned out as Claire was just saying, just to retain that human quality that we really want to preserve and make it do what you expect it to do. Yeah, it took far more work than I think we all expected.
And one of my favourite things is that also if you look at animates between what you drew and what you and the shape that it creates, and I think I love those little touches as well.
Yeah, all the details that we try and put into that experience of how it, because for us it's not enough just to make a feature. It has to. We often think about how does it make the customer feel. That ephemeral kind of quality that you can't put on a balance sheet, but for us, it's a really big part of designing and developing products is, does it put a smile on their face? Does it make them feel good? Is it a quick, efficient manner? So kind of balancing that functional side and that really human side is something that we're always trying to achieve. We don't always get it right, but we try.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very Apple kind of sensibility. And, I'm thinking about when they launched, the iPhone, and just the on-screen keyboard, like it seems so simple, but under the hood, there's all kinds of crazy code to predict which key is most likely because your thumb is big, all these things. And so maybe Claire, this is a good question for you. I mean, how I'm imagining, I'm not a software developer, but I'm imagining there's some pretty complicated stuff going on to figure out that it was close enough to a circle that we should activate the Smart Shape tool. And now we need to interpolate what the person drew, but be able, there's a lot of probably math and all kinds of crazy stuff. At the same time, the feel for an artist, holding a pencil, drawing the thing, it has to feel right too. Mm-hmm. And I often think that those are almost like two different sides of your brain. And so I'm curious, you're the chief product officer, like, do you bring that design and that artistic sensibility to the technical execution of the app? Or do you have to like distribute that across a team and somehow bring it together,
I think, especially when we were small, I think the folks had a really good sense of both. And I don't really see that division when it comes to a great experience. Like, we really care a lot about performance, and that's super important because that's a great experience for the person using it. You don't get that lag or that delay. You get that real, you feel completely in control of what you're doing. There's a lot of like you say, maths and algorithm stuff behind that, but it means that we're also often making choices about not necessarily what's correct, but what feels good. But that doesn't mean it's any less technically challenging to achieve.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if it's sufficiently, hidden and abstracted away from the user, it just feels like magic. And there's a lot of things like that. I mean, like another one of my favorite features is the way you can grab a color and then you just drag it and it fills the shape, right? And it even does the thing that, like in Photoshop, if you do that, you're going to get these little edges, these little aliased edges around it sometimes, and it fixes that too. Is there, I mean, this is maybe a little inside baseball, but I'm curious, like, what does a development cycle look like? I mean, are you building features and then having artists use them, and and just, fixing all the little bugs and all the little tweaks until it's good. Like it's because you just don't see software that feels that polished very often, and there's something unique about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, well, there's several kind of gates that it's got to get through. And like the first gates are pretty extreme, which would be people like James and our technical like leads as well. Like if that's not 120 frames a second, it's not getting to the next gate. If it's not beautiful, it's not getting there. And then usually we get some artists who are going to make commissions in those early stages, and we take some feedback from that a little bit as well. But mostly it's coming from a sense of the little voice in your head that says it's not good enough or it's not ready.
Yeah, there's a selfish and altruistic angle to all of these things. We want to use them, we want to like them, we want to be proud of them. But and then there's the functional side. The customer's got to love it as well. But one of the things we are always trying to do when we're making and inventing kind of new approaches is a lot of the times some of them are like color drop. It's not immediately obvious that that's what you can do. But once you get it, then it's forever easy, and we often try and balance that. Like even though we're bringing in novel approaches to what we're doing, we hope that once people get it, that it makes their life a little bit better, puts a smile on their face.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I got one last question about Procreate, and it kind of leads into Dreams, which I'm fascinated by, and that's this idea of who is the ideal user, who's your avatar that you're aiming for, because Procreate, as far as I could tell, is the #1 app for professional illustrators. I know for sure anyone doing hand lettering is almost certainly doing it in Procreate. We're producing a character design class right now at School of Motion, and the instructor is using Procreate for everything. It really is just like it's taken over the illustration world, so you can use it professionally, but also all 3 of my kids love Procreate. When we're on an airplane,
Awesome.
They're all using it. I love it. So it's powerful enough to be professional, but it's so fun that like a child can use it.
Yeah.
So, and I think, the conventional wisdom is don't try to appeal to everybody, pick somebody and appeal to them, right? But Procreate kind of does appeal to everybody, I think. So I'm curious if that's intentional. Is that what you were aiming at?
I mean, certainly intentional, Joe. It's music to my ears, man, when you say that. 'Cause that's
We're
kind
just
of
so smart over here.
It's kind of the balance we're always trying to hit, because even professional users, they're not a subsection of humanity. They want to have things easy. They want to have the joy in what they're doing as well. But that balance is something that we're always trying to hit that sweet spot of it's functional and it's powerful, but it's accessible. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this. Like every single human, more or less, right? Maybe there are some who have never drawn something before, but almost every human has had that experience of drawing, right? And so what Procreate does is it just lets you draw in this digital way, and it's very clever how it does it. Not everyone has had the experience of animating something. And certainly, even most of our students probably haven't animated something the old-fashioned way, like drawing it frame by frame.
Yeah.
And so along comes Procreate Dreams, which I cannot wait to get my hands on, by the way. So I'm curious, why don't we start here? Who is that for? Who's Procreate Dreams for? What's your vision of that?
It's a good question, Joey. And the first version of Dreams we want to be for the fans of Procreate. Because you're not wrong, man. It is a totally different world. And we found this, it's been five plus years of development. Mm-hmm. With Procreate, when you mark the screen, you get it. It's like, I totally get what this product does. Right. And then you kind of intuitively figure everything out from that. Animation is very, very different. And we hoped to bring that super accessible experience to Dreams, but it's a very complicated process, a very different sort of process. So we even though there's an ambition to get it in the professional sphere, version 1 is most certainly for the fans of Procreate.
Yeah, I think that's the dream, is that the way that
The
Procreate,
Nice.
Procreate
I see what you did there.
the way that it makes it, Procreate made its way into professional workflows by people just using it to start with a bit of sketching that felt good and just putting together some sort of rough stuff. But then they just found, I can still, and they kept staying in there and then realising they didn't ever have to leave. And that's sort of, I think, the hope, I won't say dream again, for Procreate Dreams, that it will have the the same kind of flow. That they'll be like, I'll try a little animatic in here. I'll put together a video for my social media, and then I can make a full video. I can make a short film. I can, that's the hope of that approach. Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping that if people have used and love Procreate, hopefully they're going to feel some kind of familiarity in there. Like if you look at even the ability just to draw, we've very much deliberately tried to make it feel and look like Procreate so that our fans, when they come across, there's a sense of kind of familiarity and safety in that first experience. Yeah.
Well, that's good because animation can be very scary when you're learning it. For sure, it's very technical. So you just kind of hinted at this. I was going to ask you, how long did it take to develop this? Because Procreate, I think, according to my notes here, it's the first new product you guys released in 12 years. But you just said that you've been developing it for 5 or 6 years. Is that really how long it took?
Yeah. I mean, we completely underestimated it, Joey. I mean, like from our point of view, it was like, how hard can it be to have something move from here to there? From a technical point of view, just animating point A to point B. It can't be that hard. Well, once we put all the ambitions on the table, like, all right, it's got to be real time. It's got to have the next Procreate painting engine, because this isn't just using Procreate's painting technology. This is the technology we've been developing for over 5 years. So it's got to have that. It's got to have the experience that we want. And then as we started fleshing the product out, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And even our version 1, Joey, that we're shipping isn't the version 1 we were hoping to ship, because it's such a big product that we decided that we're going to ship a core. The core of the product there is what we'll be shipping in our version 1, but there's so much more under the hood, both mainly from a tech point of view. There's so much more tech that we could surface, but we just want to make sure that the core is on point. Yeah.
And we didn't really want to compromise between a great frame-by-frame experience, a great keyframing experience, a great video editing experience, and so getting all those to live in harmony, be able to paint and have that be a joyful time, it was a challenge.
Oh, it was hard.
I can imagine. Yeah, and so one question I had was, Procreate has animation capability in it. Yeah. And it's fairly rudimentary, but I mean, it works pretty well. And you've also got, like you can bring a 3D model in and draw it. I mean, it's got a lot of capability. So why not just extend that and just extend Procreate? Why make a new app?
I mean, I can jump in there. Yeah, bloat in software is something that we, as personally speaking, we're not fans of. As we're using other software, competitor software, it always feels like when people just add things to the product, it ticks a lot of boxes from a sales point of view, but it makes it compromises that experience. And we did actually think about putting stuff into Procreate. Let's put some audio in there and so on and so forth. But then we compromise that drawing experience, and it can be, it can put itself in a position where Procreate is kind of it can do many tasks, but a master of none. And right now we've really protected that core of it's for drawing, and so to really hit the notes of animation, we were like, we have to start again. There's no other way. Again, from a putting ourselves in the customer point of view, we felt like that was the right approach.
That's really cool. Okay, I want to ask you about, I think, what this is going to be competing with in the marketplace. So, I come from the animation world, and specifically the motion design world. Doing the kind of animation that you can do in Procreate Dreams, if you're using a traditional setup, an iMac or something like that, typically you're going to have a really big, expensive Cintiq, some kind of screen you can draw on. It's kind of a one-trick pony because that's the only thing you're going to use it for is, obviously like illustrators may use those too, but a lot of them just use iPads now. And you're using software like TV Paint is pretty expensive, or you're using Photoshop, which isn't really designed for that, but can kind of do it. And so there is kind of just some legacy clunkiness to that process. And so this is the thing I'm most fascinated about with Dreams. Like, did you do like user research and look at all of that and say like, okay, this is horrible, we're gonna fix that? Or did you just kind of blue sky this whole thing? It's like, okay, blank slate. What if nothing existed that did animation? Because some of the features, they seem really out of left field and like way smarter than the way a lot of these things are done.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, it was more blue sky than it was market research. Almost everything we do is that blue sky approach. But we started, Joey, with the fact that we wanted to animate stuff. We wanted to actually try and figure out, could we make some software that we would want to use ourselves? And then we put a kind of an ideal up of what that experience would look like. We did also, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of those products. I'm not in any way an expert, but looking at the software products, none of them felt humane, So the market research was very, very little. Most of it was us trying to hit an ideal experience that we would want to use ourselves.
The way I like to think of it, we care a lot about the problems that people are trying to solve, like when they're trying to make some motion graphics or make a short film or what. And so it's more about looking at those problems and what multi-touch can bring to that, and what would be a great experience on iPad, rather than trying to replicate what people already know how to do.
Yeah, one of the things we did find, Joey, was the pipeline stuff was pretty mental. Like, you've got the drawing software, then you need the compositing software, then you need the editing software. And to be honest, we didn't really know about that problem until we were deep into the development of Procreate Dreams, because we were just trying to hit that ideal experience. What is the best way that we can make an animation? And so from our point of view, it was one experience. And we found as we did start to then reach out to certain animators and stuff, that they were like, "Oh wow, you've combined the pipeline," and we went, "Yes,
we sure did.
That's what we meant."
And those people are super excited because they might have to ship off parts of the process to different people, and now they feel like they'll be able to have control of all it and do it from their couch at the same time.
Totally, and even like performing, Joey, like that was a big one for us. Like that allows people like me to animate, with very rudimentary skills of animation. That, and again, it harnesses that power of the iPad. We're really all about trying to figure out really humane ways of interacting with technology. And what better way to make an animation than just move it how you want it to feel? I think that was we had that as our goal from the inception of the idea, this performing idea. But to marry that with keyframing and a lot of the expectations that professional animators have, that's been a challenge, but I think we're getting close to that ideal experience now.
Yeah, so one of the things that kind of blew my mind when I saw the launch video was the timeline that you guys have built, because most of my professional work has always been done in After Effects. And so After Effects, the pipeline is exactly what you described. You're generally, if you're doing cell animation or incorporating it, it's coming from somewhere else. You can't really do that in After Effects, and you've got to do a whole bunch of things with it. And but oftentimes the cell animated stuff needs to sync up perfectly to the pixel and to the frame, and it can be very, very tricky to do that. And so just to think about, like, how would I even visualize one tool that can keyframe, but you can also draw on top of things like that. The timeline is very, very innovative, and we're going to be putting a lot of B-roll over this interview, so everyone can see what it looks like, and we're going to link to everything in the show notes so you can check it out. But I'd love to hear maybe a little bit of the backstory behind developing maybe that feature of the timeline, because it doesn't work the way other timelines work. Before we hear that answer, I wanted to tell you about something really cool that we offer at School of Motion. The Path to MoGraph is a 100% free 10-day class that will show you in detail what it looks like to work as a motion designer. You'll get to see inside some of the coolest studios on earth. You'll get to see a motion design project completed from start to finish, and you'll get a really good sense of the opportunities out there for designers, animators, and 3D artists. Check it out. The link is in the description, and it is totally free. That's it. Now back to James and Claire.
I mean, I could start. Claire, it'd be good we can kind of jump into some of the more detailed stuff, talk about the cottage run and stuff. But the ideal experience for us was using, I know it sounds kind of reductive, but just using pinch zoom, because that's a really powerful method and a really intuitive method that we all understand how to, get more data and less data. And balancing how we could have, absolute frame detail with, as we called it, the Lord of the Rings timeline, was something that took years to get right. Yeah. And I can tell you from personal experience, starting that design, I went through, I don't know how many iterations, and they all sucked. I couldn't get it right. I was throwing everything at it, and I enlisted Claire's help, and we sat down and we had to take a different approach, still trying to get that ideal experience of zooming in and out and trying to understand how we could balance that. There's so much more. I'm being quite reductive here, Joey, but Claire, do you want to jump in and talk about the cottage run?
Yeah, well, because we had there were already been quite a few iterations of the timeline at that point, but they kept they couldn't hit all the points that we needed it to hit, which would be like, you can get to a frame, like you mentioned, a frame detail and really get in there and finesse that, but also be able to work on a much larger project. And you've got quite a small amount of space to be working with. And a lot of what at that point we did do a little bit of looking what other people were doing, but it's very locked. It's very hard to navigate around a large project, or it's easy to navigate around a large project, but you can't get in there to the details. So trying to marry all of that together, as well as make it so that something like keyframing feels like you're in control of like where like things are happening where I've asked them to happen. Like one of the things that was bothering me is that a lot of a disconnect between like, okay, I want a keyframe here. All right, now I've got to open another panel and do and now that's taken up another large part of my screen.
Story
and I
of my
can't
life, Claire.
on the stage, and now I can't see the effect of it on my movie anymore. And so the actual screen itself is quite a big challenge. But I think using things like pinch zoom, which is such a I think the iPhone 1, it's been a fundamental part of that iOS experience from the beginning. But getting that all right and making sure that everything lined up and that we could still include the hierarchies of groups, which is such a powerful part of Procreate Dreams as well. Yeah, that was a lot of challenges to sort of have to solve all at once. There was no kind of opportunity to say, oh, we'll come back later and make that work. It had to be solved all in one go.
Yeah, and to be honest, Joey, I think we'll probably be iterating even further on this because our timeline in our version 1, it's definitely a core, but there's more we want to do to that because it is a very novel experience. I think there's going to be some really interesting feedback we're going to get, and we love hearing from customers and hearing what they think. So I'm sure there's going to be improvements we're going to make. We're all about that. We never like to sit still at version 1. We kind of want to listen and see what we can improve there.
I love that. I mean, I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe you guys just sat down and you imagined the whole thing and then you just built it. It sounds more like you just beat your head against it.
That was the way, Joe.
For 5 years until finally, there was no more blood coming out. I want to hear about some of the other technology behind this because in your launch presentation, James, I'll get the numbers wrong. You can correct me, but the canvas that you can actually animate on and move the virtual camera around is orders of magnitude larger than what is currently in Procreate. So I'm assuming that's the new engine you're talking about. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit because that's one of those things that it's for an animator, maybe that isn't the sexiest feature. That's not why they're getting it, but what should we know about that?
Yeah, that's been a long journey, Joey. Like I said, we started that years and years ago. Probably, I think it was before the actual Dreams project started. So it's been a long journey to because if you look at Procreate right now, it's limited by the GPU memory. So whatever that iPad GPU memory is, that's the maximum texture size that we can use. And the reason why we keep it all in memory is so it's fast. It's always fast. But we've had a lot of people who wanted more resolution for Procreate. So we started with that project. That was one of the big ambitions, busting out of that texture memory limitation. But with Procreate Dreams, the animation side was very different because if you've got your stage and you want to bring in, an asset that's bigger than the stage, well, we can't do that with our current technology. So we brought forward this very novel conceptual technology that we were working on for Procreate and put it on the project, the Procreate Dreams project. But it's not just about the bonkers pixels that you can do. So 1 million by 1 million pixels was the marketing line that we've used. But the reason is it's not so much that you want to create a 1 million by 1 million
someone will.
pixel. No, someone probably will, yeah. But no TV can display those pixels. So it's not actually about the raw resolution. What it really gives animators is this whole new kind of way to play and make stuff because your stages, let's say it's fixed at 4K. Well, we can bring in a 32K asset and bring it in and move it around, scale it without any loss of fidelity. And that's a whole new way to kind of think about dimensionality and resolution in an animation product. And there's still more that we're going to be doing down that road, but that's really the purpose behind it. It's less about making these bonkers big documents and more about how do we keep fidelity and freedom in that animation process.
And was that I mean, was that really difficult? I mean, I can't even
Yes.
imagine. Like, how do you? I mean, you don't have to get into the technical details, but I'm just curious. Like,
Yeah.
you know, how do you even begin to solve a problem like that? Is that like is that an engineering problem that then opens up creative capabilities, or is that I want these creative capabilities? Here you go, really smart engineer, figure it out.
That was the way we approached it.
James wants it. Make it happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had it reading data, which was the early stuff, so you could read, a lot of pixels very, very fast. It was actually writing the pixels that was really difficult. So that the disk can kind of, it can figure out what's there, but to actually write data back and do it as quickly as you can read it, it took a lot of smart people. I'm very lucky to have the team we've got to figure that problem out. I don't know, like.
And every time that we had to think about like a feature, it's got to be kind of reimagined for this new world. Like color fill, okay, so you color drop one. Does that mean it goes color?
Infinitely?
It fills to infinitely. Like
Yeah, a lot of challenges.
So what about the performance? So I mean, in all the demos that I've seen, everything looks like you do it and then you hit play and it just plays. And there's no such thing as a RAM preview, which if either of you have used After Effects, that's sort of the world you live in. You're constantly. So is that? I mean, is that sort of the bar you're trying to stick to? Like, there will not be renders in this app?
I think that's our ideal experience, is that it's always real time. But we're also realistic in knowing that, at some point, if you're making Lord of the Rings and you've got, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tracks, at some point we're just going to hit physics, and heat. And so at some point we will probably be reducing some of the fidelity on the stage, so that we can keep that real time. So if you look at how we've approached things in Procreate, we always try and maintain that experience. And we're going to be trying to do the same with Procreate Dreams. Who knows, in the future, we may bring some sort of high fidelity view or something, but right now we've managed to keep it running as fast as the user would expect.
Yeah, I think that is a very core part of it, though, is to make sure that if you want to try something out, you can just try it out. There's not going to be, the tools aren't getting in your way. You're just can be, making those, experimenting, playing it with it as fast as you can imagine new ways.
That's awesome. Is it still a fully raster-based app, or is there any vector functions in it?
No vector at the moment. I know that we'll probably get a lot of people requesting that in the future.
That was the number one question when I said I was interviewing you guys.
Oh, really?
Just so you guys know.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're listening to that feedback. Definitely listening to that feedback, but right now it's all raster. But I think there's something interesting about that too, like bringing the Procreate engine into, or the new version of our engine into Procreate Dreams. There's something cool about, we can't wait to see what people do with like really expressive texturalized kind of brushes and animating that. I know we're pretty pumped to see what happens there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I kind of want to save this till the end, but I saw a quote from Aaron Blaise about Dreams, because I know you guys enlisted him to make this film. Yeah. But there's something about, whenever a tool has like this quantum leap in accessibility, it really does change the way art looks, because, when After Effects became really popular and it can use vector art, and you can scale it up and down, and vector art's, it's pretty easy to make, it's quick. All of a sudden, everything in the world of motion design was vector for a while. And so I think it's just like it's like a habit that especially motion designers have, like, oh, I need vector. But if you have a 1,000,000 by 1,000,000 pixel canvas, maybe you don't. Like, maybe the resolution's there,
Yeah. It reminds me, Joey, of AutoCAD. When AutoCAD brought out the chamfer function, what we saw was buildings all around the world with chamfers, because architects were like, "Oh, hell yeah, chamfer this shit, chamfer that shit," and then you get this in the world. You get these buildings now that have that tool that's been expressed out. So you're not wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned this a little bit, that there's this pipeline that like especially studios that do this kind of work a lot, they have a pipeline already. And you might, and that pipeline might even include different stages of cell animation. You may have sort of the rough animation, and then you've got the tweening, and then the tie down, all these things. And so, are you intending that eventually? I know this is V1 of Dreams, but is the intent that eventually you could literally do every single step all the way through compositing, maybe a little bit of mixing, you output the final thing? Or are you thinking that this can plug into existing pipelines and you can export in a way that works really well with After Effects and stuff like that?
I think we've got to be realistic, in the first instance, Joey, that we're hoping that it'll be involved in the pipeline.
Yeah.
I think that's our first kind of hope, and listen and hear what customers think. But we certainly have ambitions to improve that pipeline, and I can't actually talk about roadmap stuff, but we certainly are seeing a lot of improvement we can bring to that pipeline itself, and that's a pretty exciting opportunity for us, because like the amount of work that when we started talking to like actual industry professionals, we were blown away with the amount of grind that people have to go through, and the amount of complicated steps that's required. And we were kind of sitting back going, I think we can improve this. But version 1 will probably, hopefully, just be involved in the process, and then we'll be kind of adding to that.
Yeah, I mean, please do improve. So you may not be willing at this point to talk about specific features that are on the roadmap, but I'm curious if maybe you can dance around it. What are some of the problems that you're seeing, these painful things that you think you might be able to fix one day?
I mean, I can jump in there and just talk a little bit about just the frame export from a cell animation product. So if you've got a cell animation product and you've got to pump out, hundreds, thousands of these, PNG frames or TIFFs or TGAs or whatever they are, and then recomposite them back in, even just that process itself seems very unnecessary to us. I'm trying to dance around this.
Yeah.
Seems very unnecessary, and I think there's a lot of different crafts that go into forming an animation, from writing, storyboarding, audio. There's a lot of different media that also goes through that, and I think there's a really there's a lot of potential in consolidating how that might work.
Oh, so even on like the upfront sort of story production end of things, that's really interesting. I was thinking, one of the most complicated forms of animation. So first of all, cell animation is obviously, to me, that's kind of that's the black belt of animation. It's just really hard to get good at that.
Yeah.
And then if you're
Black
doing
belt,
that with character animation, well, now you're Aaron Blaise, okay, and you were senior animator on The Lion King, and are you guys looking to innovate? Because there's sort of the app and the experience of doing the animation, and there's a lot of really cool things you could do there. And then you can get into the nuts and bolts of like, okay, character animation's hard. You could add rigging functionality, IK, FK, stuff like that. Is there any breadcrumbs you can give us as far as that goes? Like sort of what use cases you're trying to solve for here?
I think I can say this, that the tech that we've developed under the hood, we're only seeing a very small proportion of what the tech is capable of. I think that's the safest way I can put that.
This is good. You've been media coached very well, James. This is awesome. This is kind of a loaded question, but we'll see what comes of it. So I already brought this up. Like, everyone on Earth basically has drawn before. Not everyone has animated. Most people haven't animated. And so you must have some hope for this, some dream. Okay, I'll hop on the pun wagon. Why not? For how this impacts just the art form of animation. I mean, I think it's fair to say that Procreate has made illustration a lot more accessible, a lot more fun. Like a lot of kids know about it. They're going to grow up having used Procreate. Maybe they'll be professionals. So do you have any thoughts about if this works and Dreams takes off, what do you hope the world of animation looks like, in 10 years?
You got to have something
just
to say for that one.
I mean, at first I just wanted to talk about, I think there's a couple of entry points that people will have into it. I can see, the people are making a lot of video content, like kids and everyone, just trying to share things with their friends and family. So even just being able to take that to the next level with some, basic keyframing. I can draw a little bit on it. I can add a few effects. Just having that be a very accessible experience as that sort of entry level to that, and then hopefully they'll get more experimental over time. And the similar thing for illustrators, because they have it's like they should feel quite at home with our painting tools that are in Procreate Dreams. And then, so one of the nice things I've seen people doing is take a layered Procreate document and now animate parts of it separately, and they're like, okay, I understand how this works, and I can make something that's really in my style. And that's my biggest dream, is that they will just have all these really artistic styles from these people who are taking all that knowledge that they've already built up from Procreate, and hopefully that we've built a place where they feel comfortable enough to play and learn.
I I just to riff on that, I love Aaron's work. You know, you mentioned Aaron, Joey. I love his work. I think there's a lot of fans, but that style, you know, there's been a propensity in the industry to move to 3D. Everything's going to 3D. Everything's going to 3D. You know, we're talking pie in the sky here of what we imagine might happen. I'm hoping we see a little bit of a resurgence in hand-drawn, authentic, especially with this whole AI thing that's happening, where it just feels so cheap and nasty. Having this real, authentic, hand-drawn, and probably very nostalgic, you know, style of animation is something we're hoping to see. And just riffing on that, yeah, we might see some amazing new styles, but I'm still hoping we get to see, I don't know, some classic styles with new kind of stories, new ideas. Because, I don't know, it feels like animation's having a bit of a resurgence at the moment. You know, Into the Spideyverse kind of kicked up some interest. Rick and Morty. Holy shit, did you guys see the latest Rick and Morty?
I haven't seen it yet.
The spaghetti episode? No? Yeah, probably shouldn't talk about it because it's pretty dark. But it made
I
me
like it.
But it made me feel something, and it just kind of reminded me the power of you know, 2D animation. And I would love to see more of that storytelling. We're hoping that we're going to give a voice to storytellers that maybe didn't have a voice before, couldn't afford to buy into all the high-tech stuff. And that would be awesome if we could get a whole new kind of generation of storytellers. That'd be sick.
Yeah, and they can get some like really weird art styles and weird stories, and because everyone can publish it themselves now, like why wouldn't you? What's stopping you?
Totally. I mean, you've got the internet now. You don't have to go through publishers necessarily. So this independent side of animation, I don't know, that's really exciting from us. Look, and we have no idea where Dreams will go. We're just hoping that voice that we're going to give to storytellers is something that's going to manifest. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to ask you about that AI comment you just made. So, you know, we're going to link to this and we're going to play clips of it. So Aaron created this. It looks like an old Disney film. It's beautiful. This story about this penguin, and and you know, he did it completely in the app. I think literally 100% of it. Maybe the music and the sound wasn't, but you know, all of the artwork was done in this app. And he raves about it. And you're right. You're exactly right. There's something undeniable about looking at something that a human did. And you know, I have very mixed feelings about the AI thing. Some days I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever, because my daughter can have an idea and she can just type it in and there it is and it makes her happy. That's cool. But then at the same time, there is this, especially the current just iteration, I think, of these tools, like the output, sometimes it takes your breath away. You can't believe the fidelity of it, but there is something missing, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, maybe you could just, both of you can comment. I'm just curious, what's your overall take on the big question about AI? Is it art? Is it creative? Or is it just copying? Is it a copy of a copy of a copy?
I think we've both got something to say on this subject, because Claire has a background in AI. But I'll jump in and start with my opinion anyway, which is, I think as humans we value art that has struggle involved. It's part of the process it's the joy. You know, people like us, to make something, we're going to do it whether we get paid or not. Right. You know, we want to make stuff and it's the struggle, the journey, the learning, that struggle is something that's so important to creatives. And I think from the AI perspective, just typing in stuff is very accessible, but it's kind of removed all of that the struggle involved in making something. And I think what that does is it devalues the end result. So if I type in a few words and I get a lovely picture, there's not much value in that, because anyone can do it. It's a very cheap form of art. And whether or not it's art, I don't know. I think we'll leave that for history to decide. But I think when you remove that struggle, it's going to attract a different audience, in my opinion. Because people like us who love the journey, that love the learning process, the highs, the lows, that's why we're here. We're here for that journey. And when you remove the journey, I don't think creatives are going to move to those tools. I think it's probably going to be very accessible to a whole bunch of people who maybe aren't interested in the struggle. They're just interested in that output. So I think from our point of view with you know, watching Aaron, I mean, Aaron is such a master, man. When we gave him our build, we were like, look, it's not finished. It's buggy, it's probably going to crash, and it's missing half the features. And he was like, can I draw? Can I erase? Can I color? I was like, yes. And he just blew us away.
That's all he needs.
Yeah, that's all you need. And I think we all appreciate that the time and effort when we watch something that's hand drawn and handcrafted, because it kind of extends further even out of animation. Anything I think that we see that's handmade, we attribute a lot of appreciation to that because we understand there's been a lot of time and care and struggle involved in that. So AI is such a hot topic at the moment. I won't even talk about the fact they're ripping off artists everywhere, but
right.
But the struggle itself, I think, is the interesting part. It's why we're still very big believers in handmade. I don't think that's going to go away. I think it's a human condition.
And I think that's also nice. And like we talked about vector, that will be nice about the Raster effort. It's like you really get that feeling of the hand drawnness of
it's imperfect.
It's in another dimension.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Claire, what's your take? If you have a background in AI, and this is one thing I kind of struggle with because, I'm trying as hard as I can to learn how do these things actually work, because it just seems like magic to me. And I feel like if I really understood how they're working, maybe it wouldn't be so impressive. Maybe it's, like, like if instead of, microscopic little, transistors on a chip, these AI tools were built out of steam engines and it was the size of the moon, but it did the same thing, it wouldn't feel so magical. But, if you have a background in this, maybe you actually do understand how large language models work and how Midjourney works. So what's your take on, I guess, maybe the value of the output of these things and how this affects artists and the people who consume the art?
Well, I don't think I can be as poetic as James has already been about the struggle and things, but I also think that if you put yourself on the side of it's not art, history will usually decide that you were behind the times kind of thing. So I think that's always dangerous to go around declaring what is and isn't art. But I think, I don't think I can contribute in any more than what James has already said.
Gotcha. Well, I it's funny because that didn't occur to me, James, until you said that, but I do think that there very well could be this opposite reaction pushing against AI, which most of the stuff that comes out of it, it just, it's like the models are trying to make everything more and more perfect looking, and the renders are perfect. And so I think very naturally there might just be a pushback against that, where it's like, no, I want to see a pencil. And I literally want pencil. I want to see the texture of the paper. I want to see like an outline where something was erased. I want it to be imperfect. I want to know a human did this. And on that note, so I was watching Aaron's movie, and then I was watching this little behind the scenes, and at the end of the video, and I hope you guys have seen this because the way he says it, the glow in his eyes, I was like almost in tears. He says, I think it might be single-handedly responsible for bringing 2D back, talking about dreams. And that's kind of my hope for it, is that it makes the process so much easier than it is currently, that more people will try it. It's going to be easier to teach. That's really important to me. It's not easy to teach right now because you have to have, if you're doing it digitally, a lot of expensive gear. And now you just need an iPad, which almost everybody has. So I'll leave you with that. How does that make you feel? Aaron Blaise, one of the best living animators on earth, saying that about V1 of Procreate Dreams.
I mean, there's two parts of that, Joey. Like, one was, it's Aaron fucking Blaise saying that.
I know. It is Aaron fucking Blaise, yeah.
Oh, shit. Like, that made me feel something in there, but it's also a responsibility that we also feel now.
Yeah,
of like,
a lot of pressure, too.
How do we live up to that? How do we live up to that expectation? Because it's something both exciting and maybe a little terrifying as well.
No pressure.
What an amazing thing to be able to contribute to the world. Like I love making things. It makes me feel good, and to know that you're helping other people make things that will make them feel good, like
totally,
it's pretty cool. Yeah, even like people who study. One thing I kept hearing from people is that I studied animation, but I kind of stopped doing it or gave up on it quite early. So there's people around, I think, with the skills, but they don't. They felt that blockage of like I can't get what I want.
Yeah.
I can't get the result that I want. So they've stopped. And with Procreate, we hear that all the time. Is that like I hadn't done anything creative for years, and now I can't stop. Like if that would happen and we just saw all this amazing content suddenly popping out, and how cool would that be?
I mean, we're going to use that energy too, right? Like when we see people making cool stuff, that just fires us up to go back. How do we make this better? How do we give more power here? How do we empower people on this side of the fence? And it's going to be a cool journey, because one of the things that we do too, Joe, is like, this is just version 1. We use this song, you know, it's only the beginning in our little reveal video, quite deliberately, because we've got so much plans. There's so much potential that we've got both under the hood, and so much learning to do from people like yourself and people all over the world that we want to hear from. And so the potential that we've got in the future is something that really, really excites us. There's so much more we want to do and so much more we want to bring, but the excitement and that kind of loop feeding off the energy, it's kind of like being, you know, at a concert. You know, the louder the crowd, the more harder you're going to play.
Totally.
You know?
What do you think about Dreams? Click the like button and leave a comment to let us know, or hit us up on social media at School of Motion. And make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, because we are turning on the afterburners and have some insanely great episodes lined up. I cannot thank James and Claire enough for their time. We recorded this episode 11 days before the launch of Dreams, so I'm sure that they had been working a lot of extra hours to get ready, and it was truly an honor to be able to meet two of the people responsible for building such incredible tools for artists. Procreate Dreams is available right now for $20 on the App Store, and I suspect we will be talking about this app quite a bit over the coming years. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one.